Но мы продолжаем наполняться гигабайтами знаний, и я хочу предоставить слово человеку, который расскажет самое важное о цифровой трансформации. Дамы и господа, профессор бизнес-школы AMD Майкл Вейд.
Доброе утро. Good morning. Thank you. I'm afraid that's all you're gonna get on the from me speaking Russian, and that's good for you, believe me. So I'm going to share some of my thoughts about what you really need to know about digital transformation. Are any of you going through a digital transformation at the moment? Raise your hands. Okay, that's at least half of you are going through a digital transformation, and I assume it's going extremely well. No problems anywhere along the line? Yes, good. We have one person in the audience who's having no problems with their digital transformation. So please speak to him in the break. So I'm visiting here. I'm very happy to be here. I'm visiting from Switzerland, where I live, but I'm not Swiss. I'm actually Canadian. So coming here, I came here directly from Singapore. So it was about a 35-degree difference in temperature. But as a Canadian, I prefer it when it's a little bit cold like this. So I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to share thoughts on what it means to go through a digital transformation and some of our thoughts on how to increase the chances of gaining value from the transformation process. So I'm a professor at a business school called IMD, and I also run a research center there called the Global Center for Digital Business Transformation. So the content that I'm going to be sharing with you is coming from work that we've done in that center. We released a book 2 years ago called Digital Vortex. It's a strategy book around digital transformation. It was recently translated into Russian. And one of the pieces of work that we did was we assessed different industries on their vulnerability to digital disruption. And we placed it on this vortex. And a vortex is like a whirlpool or a tornado or something like that. And I'm afraid I have some very bad news for many of you in the audience today. And the bad news is that the industry that is in the center of the vortex, meaning the one that's most vulnerable to disruption, is the media and entertainment industry, and many of you are in this industry. So you're probably feeling the impacts of that disruption. And there is massive disruption. It's not the only industry that's seeing disruption. There are many others. The ones in the orange here, close to the center, are the ones that we see as the most vulnerable to disruption. So, we have financial services, we have retail in there. Many of you are in that industry, tech products and services, telco, and so forth. And these industries tend to be B2C focused, and they tend to have the characteristic that the core product or service is intangible, meaning that it can be digitized. I mean, you can digitize content, you can digitize media, you can digitize money, you can digitize communication. And that makes those industries more vulnerable to disruption. But what if you're in one of the industries on the outside of the vortex here? Does that mean you can relax and not worry? Probably not. As we just heard from the previous speaker, even the pharmaceutical industry, which is one of the ones toward the outside, over here, number 13, we're seeing a massive amount of change and disruption. Now, what if I were to ask you this question? You see this list of industries. Where would you place a company like Amazon here? Now, you're lucky in this country because Amazon is not really playing here. You've done actually, as a country, you've done an extremely good job of keeping those Americans out. Now, I'm Canadian, so I can say that. We do the same. But you've done a pretty good job of keeping the Americans out. You know, you kicked out Uber. You know, Amazon is not particularly strong here. Google's not particularly strong here. So you've done a pretty good job on that. But where would you put Amazon here? 2. Yeah? Yeah? Anywhere else? 3. 1. Yeah, we can keep going, right? We can keep going. So you see, when it comes to these disruptors, and Yandex is a good example. You know, they're everywhere, and they don't particularly care about how we define what an industry is. You know, you're supposed to stay in your industry. They don't particularly care about that. They essentially go everywhere where they see margin. So if you have margin in your business, they're going to go there. And all these companies are the same, the big ones, you know, Google, Facebook, Amazon, Alibaba, Yandex. I put them all together, Mail.ru. They're growth companies. They're seen by the market as growth companies. They're not value stocks, they're growth stocks. And because they're growth stocks, they have to grow. So they're always looking for new sources of revenue. Profits are less important, but new sources of revenue. So they will continue to go from market to market to market. Now, yesterday in Singapore, I had a session with the Southeast Asian leadership team of Unilever. Is anybody from Unilever here? Okay, so you may know those and you know, they are, for them, you know, it's a mixed bag. You know, these e-commerce companies are a new channel to market. They're a new route to market. But many of these companies are also starting to produce their own products that compete with your products. So it's, you know, on the one hand, you need them, you want them, but on the other hand, they may well compete with you, which creates this interesting tension. Amazon is, of course, led by this guy. I don't know if you know who he is. He is, in fact, the world's richest man. As of today, that may change. The stock has been going like this recently, but as of today, he's the world's richest man. This picture was taken not now, it was taken 20 years ago, when he was, you know, the head of the world's largest bookstore. Have you seen what he looks like today? You know what he looks like today? This is what he looks like today. Look at that. He's coming for you. Huh? And he's not going to be nice, right? Will Amazon really make a serious effort to enter the Russian market? I wouldn't bet against it. I wouldn't bet against it because they, you know, they're now a $200 billion US dollar company. Revenues of $200 billion, which is big. And because they're a growth company, they need to grow double digits every year. The smallest double digit you have is 10. So imagine they have to add at least 20 billion US dollars every year. Where is that revenue going to come from? So partially it's going to come from increasing the scope of activity, going into new industries. But for sure, part of it's going to come from geographical expansion. And at the moment, the Americans and the Chinese are converging on India and Southeast Asia. That's the new global battleground for those digital giants. But how long before they come to this country? So be prepared. Maybe it'll never happen, but I wouldn't bet against it. All right, so you have these giants. Here's another one. Do any of you know what this is? Exactly. Somebody knows. In fact, I'm sure most of you know. It's a Singles Day, right? 11/11 was about 10 days ago, and they made a record of gross merchandise volume. That day was about just over 30 billion US dollars. You know the concept of Singles Day? No. Okay, let me explain Singles Day, because some people say that the Chinese do not innovate. This is not true. This is not true. The concept behind Singles Day is super interesting and elegant. If you think of a celebration you have in your life, like a birthday, or New Year's, or wedding anniversary, or Christmas, all of these are celebrations. They all have one thing in common, and that thing is that you buy a gift and you give it to someone else. In Singles Day, that's not the case. You buy a gift and you give it to yourself. What a beautiful concept, huh? What a beautiful concept. You always get what you want. Huh? And you get massive discounts. So Singles Day is the 11th of November every year. It's an Alibaba creation. Alibaba created this. It's massive, but even 30 billion, talking about the need to grow, there's a little bit of a question. Is that impressive or is it disappointing? Because the growth was only 24% from 2017 to 2018, and 24% is not enough. So what are they going to do next year? How are they going to get the growth? They're going to push the global footprint. And I've seen Singles Day ads. In fact, I saw a Singles Day ad. I live in Switzerland, as I told you. Switzerland, it's the very last country that anything happens in. And even my local, a department store in Switzerland has I don't think they really understood. They kind of missed. But anyway, they were advertising a Singles Day. So it's going to come, and they're really going to push globally next year, including, I'm sure, a bigger push into the Russian market. So digital disruption is a thing. We see lots of examples of digital disruption, and we define it as the impact of digital technologies. And you already heard this morning the definition of digital. So the impact of those technologies and business models on your performance, on the market position of your companies. We see plenty of examples of this. You may have seen this slide before. It just shows the biggest companies in the world at 5-year intervals. So starting in 2001, and the most recent one, 2016. 5-year intervals. And what do you notice? You notice a couple of things here. One is that in 2016, all the biggest companies in the world are technology companies. And the other thing you notice is that they change. So every 5 years, there's a big change in the companies that make up the list, the 5 biggest companies in the world. And what do you think about the next one? 2021, if we think in two and a half years, 2.5 years from now, do you think it'll be the same companies? I can tell you almost certainly it will not be these companies. Now, we don't know which ones it's going to be, but it almost certainly will not be these companies, because the change is not going to slow down. It's not going to get more stable. That's for sure. It's going to change even faster. So I think we're going to see, do you think we'll see a Russian company? Who knows? Who knows? I guess we have to wait 2.5 years to find out. There are some interesting examples. I think, as I mentioned, from the perspective of your country, the good news is you've been quite successful in creating your own digital companies to compete with the global giants. The big company, Facebook, Instagram is pretty successful here, but Google has not been successful, Amazon has not been successful, Alibaba has not been particularly successful. That's on the positive side, but I think there's also a worrying side, which is the venture capital story. If we look at unicorns, number of unicorns, unicorns are private companies that are worth $1 billion US dollars or more. And I think in the world today there's about 270. 270 companies around the world that are worth 1 billion or more. And many of them are in the technology space. How many of those 270 are Russian? You can use one hand, right? 4. 2. Yeah, I don't know exactly the number, but it's definitely single digits, right? And small single digits, which is incredible for a country this big. with the level of education that there is, to have so few. I would expect to see many more. So I think there's sort of a positive story and a less positive story. As far as now this is not my slide. This is Alexei's slide here from the ADV, looking at the different countries. And at the moment, the e-commerce landscape is quite fragmented here in Russia, where it's consolidating in the US and China. Europe is also relatively fragmented. And I think it's yet to be seen what's going to happen here, whether we're going to see the same high concentration of power in just a few digital giants here as we're seeing in other countries, or it's going to remain relatively fragmented. I don't know how it's going to look, but it matters to you how it's going to look. Because there's a big difference in the dynamics of those countries when you have one or two or three players controlling a massive amount of the economic activity, and certainly spending around advertising. Well, okay, what are you looking at here? You're looking at a picture, and the faces are blurred. This is on purpose because I don't want you to see who they are. This is a picture taken. We at IMD, we regularly have courses and programs where companies bring their executives and we talk about different things. I typically talk about digital transformation and disruption. ADV brought a group earlier this year for a week. So this is actually a picture taken in 2015, March of 2015. Any of you in the luxury area? Luxury? Okay, a few of you. But certainly you know the business. This is one of the biggest global luxury houses. So house of brands, meaning there's a holding company and then there's lots of brands. So this is a picture of all the key people in this company. So you have the CEO of the holding company, and then you have the CEOs of most of all of the big brands, and then key people outside of that function, people running different functions and so forth. And what I wanted to show you this picture, because if I update it to today, so 3.5 years later, this is what it looks like. So where you see the X's, those people are no longer working for the company. Most of them are retired. So there's a massive shift in a very conservative industry. This is luxury. These are brands that have been around for, some of them, hundreds of years. You know how it is in this industry. It's doesn't change very, very fast. And yet we see massive shift in the people at the top of this particular company. And why is that? It's because of digital disruption, mainly. And it's interesting in this case because the product itself has not changed very much. The product, a luxury watch or nice piece of jewelry or high fashion, it's still the way it is. It hasn't been digitized. But everything around it has been digitized, including the route to market, including how they do promotion, including their supply chains, including the way they engage with their customers and their consumers. It's all been completely changed. So I think that's the impact that you can see of digital disruption, even if the product itself is not changed. If the product itself is changed, then it becomes even more dramatic. And here, the people who mainly were retired, if you know what I mean by that, they were retired. These are good people. These are really knowledgeable executives that understand the business extremely well, that have been in leadership positions for decades. It's not that they're bad people, but it's not the right people to take the organization forward. And I think you're seeing that generation shift in many organizations. Maybe you recognize it in yours. So really what the challenge is how you react to the disruption. And this is where we come with the definition of digital business transformation. And we define it as organizational change through the use of digital tools, technologies, and business models to improve performance. Now, I just want to be very clear about this definition. What is the objective of digital transformation? I'll tell you what it is not. The objective of digital transformation is not to become a digital company or to become more digital. We have lots of companies coming to us saying, could you help us to become more digital? We want to be a digital company. We have a bank. We want to be a digital bank. You know, a retailer. We want to be a digital company. No, you don't. That's not what you want. If your objective is to become more digital or to become a digital company, who becomes happy? Who's happy? I can tell you who's happy. The consultants are happy. The technology vendors are happy. They will love you. But will it necessarily lead to higher performance is less clear. I see incredible spending around digital, and a massive amount of that spending is waste. So part of, you know, what I hope to convince you of today is, you know, keep the focus on performance. Keep the focus on performance, whatever you define performance as. Maybe you looking at market share, maybe it's top line growth, maybe it's efficiency, maybe it's customer satisfaction, whatever it is. You define the performance indicator and then think about how digital can enable or help you to get there. Digital should never be the objective, in my view. And how do you get there? Through organizational change. And this is the little secret about digital transformation. It's a lot more about transformation than it is about digital. Digital is not easy, but transformation is harder. And if you really want to get the benefits, it's mostly about organizational transformation. It's mostly about your organizational structure, about your culture, about how you engage with your workers, with your customers, how you incentivize people. It's all that soft stuff that's going to either lead to a successful or unsuccessful conclusion. So I picked up some data that was, you know, from marketing, from eMarketer, which is kind of marketing and advertising survey data. It's not our data. This is data that comes from another source. And the question asked here is, you know, how many of you have gone through this digital transformation? And 40% said we've already gone through it. 40% said we're going through it right now. And then 10% said we're waiting. And then 10% said we don't know what you're talking about. So, but the issue I have with this is the first one there. 40% saying they've already gone through a digital transformation. For me, this is a problem because it suggests that a digital transformation, you know, you start somewhere, then you transform for a while, and then you're finished. Then you stop. You're done. But this is not the case. This is not reality. Reality is that the transformation never finishes, that you are constantly transforming. It never ends, which is quite uncomfortable for many people because it's a continual process of change. Then there's some other data that I found, again, in the industry of many of you in the room here. Two different questions. One question about you know, what are the important requirements of digital transformation in order to be successful? And the other one about, you know, what are the reasons that you might fail? So over here, we have the top three are technology supports business operations, system security, easy-to-use technologies. So the three top requirements are all technical. You see that? They're all around technology. And then there's other stuff at the bottom, like culture and blah, blah, blah. But then over here, you see the reasons for failure, the top 3 reasons for failure: lack of budget and people resources, lack of vision, and lack of willingness to change culture, are the reasons for failure. Do you see the disconnect? So it's so striking, because you see, well, companies are focusing on the technology side, and then there's other stuff, but they're focusing on the technology side. But the reasons for failure are the ones that they're not caring about. And I think this is, quite indicative of what we see for many organizations. They're seeing the transformation as essentially a digital or, IT or technology project, when the reasons for failure are more organizational. Does that make sense? That makes sense? Okay. Good. Because the bad news is this: most of the time you will fail. The data is clear. The percentage of success of digital transformation initiatives is extremely low. According to this data, consulting data from Bain, it's 95%. So 95% of these digital transformations fail. Only 5% succeed, which is extremely low. Unfortunately low. So why is this happening? There are a number of reasons, I think, why the failure rate is so high. And one of the key reasons of the failure, I link to cows. Do you know what are cows? You know. Okay. So you imagine that there's a field full of cows, and a dog walks into that field. Right, so what do the cows do? A dog is walking into a field full of cows. Yeah. You might think that they would run, but they don't. I can tell you because I live in Switzerland, and we have cows everywhere. What they do is they stop, and usually it's eating. So they're usually eating, so they stop eating, and then they focus on the dog. Now, this is when I think back, we've been studying digital transformation for about 4 years. And when I think back 4 years ago, we had lots of companies coming to us interested in digital. They wanted to know more about digital, and they were interested in the tools and the technologies and the companies and all that. They were kind of like these cows. They were interested, they were curious, they wanted to know more, but they were not necessarily ready to act. But this has changed completely in the last 2 years. In the last 2 years, this has changed because that dog in the field started to bark. And now you can imagine what happens when a dog barks in a field full of cows. They run. They run. So this is exactly what's happening today. In organizations, the cows are running. Okay. So let's link this to digital. The cows are running. So big data, analytics, you're doing that. You're doing things with mobile solutions, you're building apps. But not just one app or 2 apps, because every business unit has its own app. And then you're probably doing things with AI, and you're experimenting with machine learning. Maybe you've got a blockchain initiative that you're working on. You're doing things with you're doing things with augmented reality. Perhaps you're working with startups, you have an accelerator and an incubator. Isn't it? So you're doing lots of things. You're doing lots of things, and because you're doing lots of things, you feel good. Because activity makes you feel good. You're doing something. Yeah. But imagine cows running in a field. What is it like? Well, first, these are big animals. It's relatively dangerous. You're a little bit worried. The cows are stressed. They're not making any milk. There's dirt, shit flying everywhere. Huh? They're running around, and eventually they slow down and stop wherever it is they are in the field, and they start eating again. They haven't left the field. Right? And this is the problem with digital for many companies today. There's a confusion between activity and progress. Yes, there's activity, but very little progress. Right? Any of you like this? A few of you, yeah, a few of you. So this is you know, on the one hand, something is better than nothing. So some activity is better than no activity. That's true, but there can be a heck of a lot of wasted activity if you're not careful. So you need to think more purposefully about what you're doing in digital, make sure you're linked clearly to business objectives, making sure that you have a portfolio approach about what's going on in digital. So you can be the digital cowboy or cowgirl, if you wish, to lead your company into the digital promised land. So this is one of the reasons why there's a large amount of wastage and failure. But fundamentally, it comes down to something extremely simple. If you think about the pace of change in technology, it's going extremely quickly. Do you agree? It's even hard to keep up with all the things. We have a full-time team of people trying to keep up with the changes in technology, and it's difficult because it's changing like this. Now, what about companies, organizations? Do they also change? Yes, they do. They do. But they change slowly. Right? They change relatively slowly. And why do they change slowly? Well, because you have systems and you have bureaucracies and you have processes and you have resistance and you have fear of change and all those things that slow down the rate of change for organizations. So you have very, very quick technology change, very slow organizational change, and what that means is you have this space in the middle. This is the kind of the digital opportunity or threat. And it is both. It is both. One of the issues that I have with the word disruption is that it has a negative bias. You know, we don't want to be disrupted. But whenever there's disruption, there's winners as well as losers. So how can you make sure that it's your organization that goes into this space and not your competitor or not a digital giant or someone else? That's the critical question. And for us, part of the answer to that question is to really look at how you create value for your customers. We looked at literally hundreds of digital disruptors across different markets and industries, and we tried to figure out and understand how they were creating value, new forms of value, and how that was, and if there's anything we can draw from that, any conclusions we could draw from that. And we concluded that they're creating value in three fundamental ways. Cost value, they're producing a product or service which is just simply cheaper than the existing alternative. Sometimes free. If you think of the example of in Skype or WhatsApp or some of these communication technologies, a free alternative to an existing product that you pay for. That's cost value. The second type of value is experience value. So this is, a more convenient, easier to use, higher quality, more secure type of experience value. And the third category is platform value, where the value that you get is simply on the size and power of the platform. So if you think of Yandex, it's a good example. Many of the services are free. The experience, is pretty good. It's pretty easy to use. Whether you're using it, for search or for driving or whatever. And the power that they've built, their platform, means that you don't have to always have new logins. You don't have to download new apps all the time. So there's the value, the strength of the platform itself. And we have a special term to describe companies, disruptors, who combine all three types of value. And it is what we call them is a value vampire. A value vampire. Vampire? These guys that come in and suck your blood. But in this case, it's not blood, it's profit. Right? They're taking profit. They're taking profit out of an industry. And that makes them extremely difficult to compete against. If you're competing against a value vampire that combines low cost, great experiences, and a strong platform, that's extremely difficult. And your aspiration could be to become one. We track some of these value vampires, digital giants. And what we've noticed over time, this is impossible for you to see at the back, but some of the biggest digital companies, and then we look at all the things they're doing, and you see over time that they're becoming more and more similar, that they're competing head to head in more and more areas. And this is because of the platform. They're trying to become the ultimate platform play. And I think this is extremely important. It's easy to get caught up in the disruptor, the company, the disruptor, the company that's out there that's disrupting. It's easy to get caught up in the disruptor when the real thing you should be concerned about is not the disruptor, but disruption. What is the fundamental disruption? Because the disruptor doesn't always win. The disruptor doesn't always win. I mean, a great example for that is Uber here in Russia. You know, they're the disruptor. They're the original company that came in with the ride sharing, and they've succeeded in many places around the world, but they have not succeeded here. They have not succeeded in Southeast Asia. They have not succeeded in China. But the disruption has succeeded. It's just that somebody else won. So I think it's really important to understand in your industry, in your sector, what is the fundamental disruption that's happening, and how can you win in that disruption? Because if we look at a lot of the things that we see today, it's the disruption that's really impacted these industries, not the disruptors, right? So it's not like Amazon necessarily killed the bookstores. It's the fact that bookstores had really, really bad selection and terrible service. It's not that Uber has killed the taxis, it's because it was really hard to access them when the drivers were super rude. Never mind the fact that it was expensive. So it's really important to figure out what is the fundamental disruption and focus on that. How can you win where there's disruption, and don't worry so much about the companies, the actual disruptors. A good example, just last month, a new store opened in New York called the 4-Star Store from Amazon, the 4-Star Store. Now, why is it called 4 stars? Why is it called the 4-Star Store? It's called the 4-Star Store because they only stock items that are ranked at least 4 stars on the online marketplace. So this is very interesting because suddenly you don't need merchandising people. You don't need buyers. You don't need promotion people because they already know what you want. Because the people have said what they want online and they just stock those items that are 4 stars or more. That's fundamental disruption. Who's going to win? It's not clear. And how do you respond then? If you're being disrupted because of somebody coming in with cost, experience, and platform value, how do you respond? So what we've identified is that there's defensive and offensive strategies. And in order to successfully respond to disruption, you have to balance these two. So defensive, really thinking about your core business, and then offensive, thinking about new businesses. And to do both of those is really hard. You can optimize for one, but to do both is really hard. Let's take an example here in the music industry, because it's one that everybody knows. If we go back to Napster, do you guys know Napster? You do? You do, okay. Because I was talking with a group of MBAs a few weeks ago, and they had no idea. So they were too young, but you know. So Napster came in as the disruptor. And how did the music industry respond to Napster? They shut them down. If you remember, they blocked them, legal challenge, they blocked them, they shut them down. But the mistake of the music industry was that they confused the disruptor with the disruption. Once they got rid of Napster, which was the disruptor, they thought, great, fabulous. Now we can go back to the good old days where we charge 20 euros for a CD with 13 songs on it when you only want one of them. And they failed to realize that the disruption here was the disaggregation of music. So you only had to pay for the music that you wanted. So going from 12 songs to song by song by song, that was the fundamental disruption. They completely missed that. So who ended up occupying this space? Who ended up winning the space that was created by the disaggregation of music? It was, in most places, Apple with iTunes. Apple has no business being in this industry. They're not a music company, they don't own the music. They just figured out how to take single songs and put them on devices. So they won. They occupied that space. But the story doesn't end there, because we have a new disruption. A new disruption comes in here. This is streaming, subscription with Spotify. You know Spotify? Right? So Spotify comes in, it's a new disruption. So now there's a new battle to occupy. Who's going to win in that space? Apple comes over here, trying to figure out how to maximize the earnings from a declining market, which is the per song market, iTunes. And then eventually figuring out when to retreat, when to sell, which they've announced they're going to get out of iTunes. They're going to close iTunes. They're just figuring out when. But as soon as there's a disruption, in this case Spotify, it doesn't mean that Spotify is going to win. There's a battle to occupy. Who's going to win in this space created by subscription music? And we have some very, very big and powerful companies there. We have Spotify, we have Apple, we have Amazon, we have Google, Deezer, and others. So we don't know who's going to win, but it can't be all of them. And this cycle continues over and over again, which means you've got to be really, really careful. If you're not a disruptor, if in this room you're not a disruptor, you have to be very, very clear about when disruption happens, because as soon as that happens, there's a battle of who's going to win. And the disruptor doesn't always win. You could win. You could win if you make the right moves. And in fact, we're very, very optimistic and positive about incumbents. And many of you are incumbents, traditional companies in this room, because you have a lot of natural advantages over the startups, over the disruptors. You have great brands, you have knowledgeable people, you have access to capital. What do you not have, what don't you have, is speed. Is speed. So if you can figure out how to be a little bit faster, you have the opportunity to beat the disruptors. Okay, when it comes to the attention that you pay to these different strategies, it's not the same. Most of your attention, we see, is going to be spent on the core business, your core today's business, because that's where your revenues and profits come from today, and that's probably where most of them are going to come from tomorrow as well, and in the near future. Also, quite a bit of attention is going to be paid to how are you going to win in new areas. Digital marketing, for example. How are you going to win in that area? And then maybe you have a little bit of attention about when to get out of areas, when to sell or close, and maybe you're spending a little bit of time on how you could become a disruptor. But most of your time is on these two here. All right. How do you get there? I want to spend the last part of my time with you talking about agility. Raise your hand if you would like to be more agile. Okay, that's most of you. Raise your hand if you know what agile means. Because I can tell you what, agile is a huge buzzword today. Everybody talks about agility, but nobody really defines it clearly. We looked at this in full detail and we concluded that agility is not one thing, agility is three things. And in order to be agile as a company, you need to do these three things well. The first one is hyper-awareness. It's a sensing capability. Do you really see what is going on in your market and outside your market that could impact you? Getting that information is useful, but it's not enough. You have to make evidence-based decisions, and that's the second stage, informed decision-making. But making the decision is not enough either. You have to do something. That's a third part, is fast execution. Acting quickly, turning decisions into action, test and learn. And when you do that, you create new insights that feed into the hyper-awareness. This is why we have it as a circle. So we see these three things as being critical to being agile as an organization. So how hyper-aware are you? And we have a question for you, and this is a question you can answer using going to the website, the one you went to earlier, Future of Media 2018. If you could take out your phones if you want to participate. The question is a simple one. Globally, which of the following has the most highly subscribed YouTube channel as of today? Okay, the most highly subscribed YouTube channel as of today. You have 5 choices. And the first choice is FC Barcelona. Second choice is Justin Bieber. The third choice is Kim Kardashian. The fourth choice is Felix Schellberg. And the last final choice is the White House. The US one, not the one here. All right, we're seeing a lot of interest in Kim Kardashian. Quite a few of you like Justin Bieber. As a Canadian, that warms my heart. Very happy to see that. 3% say the White House. This is on a different planet. This is not this planet. So it looks like it's converging. About half of you, a little bit more than half of you saying Kim Kardashian. Second place is Justin Bieber. And then Felix Schellberg, and then FC Barcelona. All right, so the answer is that we know one of them has many, many more than the other 4. Is not close. Is not even close. And the one that has the most followers on YouTube by far is Felix Schellberg. And maybe you don't know who he is. But I can tell you, most people between 16 and 24 will know, especially if you're male, but not only. All the others, all the others have their kind of main living, if you will, or main activity somewhere else. They're actors or singers or whatever, sports people. Felix Schellberg is a YouTuber. This is what he is. He lives, he operates on YouTube, he creates videos of himself, posts them with comments, mostly around games. He's kind of a gamer. And that's what he does. And last year, he made $14 million US dollars being a YouTuber. So you may want to consider your career choice. It's not, if you can make it work, it's not too bad. Okay, I have another question for you, because if you're in the media industry, this is how young people today are consuming entertainment. Entertaining, but it's you can waste a lot of time. Put it that way. 15 seconds, you can waste a lot of time. So this is being hyper aware, is understanding that this is happening out there. Many of you work for big companies. Do you have a problem with silos or an issue with silos in your companies? Any of you? Silos? You're siloed? Yeah, quite a few of you. How do you know that? Well, you kind of feel it, you sense it. But now you can measure it. So you can be hyper aware about this. This particular tool measures email traffic. So if you imagine that the blue here is operations, maybe, and the red is sales and marketing, you can see, it's visible, you can see that they don't talk to each other. So you can use technology to help increase your hyper-awareness internally. You can use it using sensors and other data. IoT collects a lot of data. This is taken very close to where I live in Switzerland. It's called the Digital Acceleration Team from Nestle. Any of you from Nestle here? You want one of you? Okay, so I can't make fun of you? No, don't worry. We're not going to make fun of you. Nestle has a place called a DAT, the Digital Acceleration Team, where they take young people from across the organization and they bring them to the headquarters for 8 months at a time. So they're there for 8 months. And they do social listening, which many of you know about. So it's kind of hyper-awareness about what people are saying about your brands on social media. But they also, while they're there, they have reverse mentoring relationships with senior executives from the company. So this is a very interesting concept. It's where it's a non-traditional mentoring relationship. So instead of a senior person mentoring a junior person, you have a junior person mentoring the senior person. And so it's a very interesting twist. The junior person gets a lot of benefit from spending time with the senior person, and the senior person can finally figure out how to use Snapchat or whatever. Right? They can benefit from the knowledge of that young person. And that's also part of hyper-awareness. But that's not enough. The world's companies have databases full of data that they do not use. So you have to use that data to make informed decisions. So I have a question for you. And the question for you is about Pavel. And you all have to answer. And you answer by raising your hand. So Pavel is shy and withdrawn. Pavel is invariably helpful, but with little interest in people or in the world of reality. Pavel is a humble and tidy soul. He has a need for order and structure, and he has a passion for detail. This is Pavel. So my question to you is simple. Is Pavel more likely to be a farmer or a librarian? How many of you think he's more likely to be a farmer? How many of you think librarian? So I'd say it's about 2/3 librarian, 1/3 farmer. Let's take an informed decision-making approach to this question. Is Pavel more likely to be a farmer or a librarian? If you think about how many librarians there are in Russia, how many would you think? 20,000 maybe? 50,000? 100,000? Less? 50,000? 50,000, okay. 50,000 librarians in Russia, and what percentage of them are men? 80, high or low? Low. 20%? 10%? Less than 10%? 5%? Really? Okay, so we have 50,000 and then 5% are men, so that's what, 2,500? How many farmers in Russia? 1 million? Less? 500,000? 100,000? 200,000? What do you think? Let's say 200,000. Percentage that are men? Half? 60, 70, 80%. 80%. So 80% of 200,000 is 160,000. So then, if we look at 2,500 male librarians and 160,000 male farmers. So if you said librarian, you may be right, but you better be, what, about 48 or, yeah, about 48 times more confident than what the data suggests. Right? Now, you made an informed decision. Your decision was informed probably by farmers that you'd known, stereotypes of librarians, people named Pavel. Maybe you looked at the picture and tried to figure it out. But probably very few of you actually considered the underlying data. And this is the problem with informed decision-making in companies. It's a human problem. We overestimate the data that we see, and we underestimate the data that we do not see. And the problem with data is most of the time, it's sitting somewhere in a database. It's sitting somewhere and we don't consider it because we don't see it. So informed decision making is tough because we're battling against our human biases. There are tools that can help us to do that. There's even now sensors that not only collect data and share it, but actually do informed decision making themselves. So a lot of this is the opposite of cloud. Cloud is bringing all the data into one place. It's pushing the decision making to the edge. So informed decisions are made by sensors themselves. But that's not enough. You can make a decision. Lots of companies make decisions. Your companies make decisions all the time, and quite often nothing happens. So the third part of being agile is fast execution, taking those decisions and putting them into action. Now, if you want to see cool digital technologies and startups, go to Silicon Valley. You'll see all that. If you want to see fast execution, where do you go? Go to China. Yeah, go to China. Those guys understand speed in a way that we have no idea. They really understand what it is to move quickly, and we can learn a lot from what they do. Okay, in conclusion, this guy is very famous. He says something about survival. He said, not the biggest, the smartest, the most intelligent, the strongest survive. It's the species that are most responsive to change. And I think it's exactly the same for companies, exactly the same for organizations. The ones that are the most agile, responsive to change, are the ones that survive in the long term. And then finally, another quote, this is from the Amazon guy: the only sustainable advantage you have over others today is agility. That's it. Everything you create, someone else will replicate. Okay, I'll leave it there. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Michael. Друзья, давайте поблагодарим Майкла, профессор бизнес-школы AMD.